All right. Well, it's 3 o'clock, and I want to leave these gentlemen as much time as possible because there's a lot to talk about. If you've been living like I have and many others have under the new construction general permit now for just about a full year, you probably have gathered a few questions, and you probably have also noticed that there's been some changes to SMARTS in particular. And so we thought it would be great to have a workshop where we invited Brandon, who is the lead staff person with the Water Board for the construction general permit, and also Matthew Shimizu, who's the lead person with SMARTS, to talk about these changes and how it affects how we will be doing things on SMARTS related to the new construction general permit. So as I mentioned, we're going to have time for questions, but I'd like first, Brandon, well, before we go any further, I do want to talk about or give the disclaimer. So we do this anytime we have water board staff on one of these workshops. And that's to let you know, as you probably already guessed, this is not an official water board hearing or a staff roadshow. This is meant to be educational. So this presentation is given as information. It's not comprehensive by any means. We can't be comprehensive in an hour. The views expressed in this presentation are the views of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the State Water Resources Control Board. The SWRCB does not guarantee the accuracy of the information included in this presentation, but I think these guys will be pretty accurate, and accepts no responsibility for any consequences of its use. Terminology used may not necessarily be consistent with the SWRCB official terms, so no sending nasty emails after this to, hey, Brandon, you said. No, this is meant to be just for us to learn the changes in SMARTS. So for specific questions, it's always best, though, to contact the Water Board or your local regional water quality control board with questions about the construction general permit. So with that said, I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to let Matthew share his screen, and he is, so great. And good. All right, so we've broken this presentation, or this interview, you might say, into 4 distinct parts. And but before we jump into that, as I mentioned, Brandon and Matthew, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you do with the water board? I kind of already spilled the beans, but if you just elaborate a little bit more.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start. So, hi everyone, my name is Brandon Roosenboom. I am the lead staff for the Construction Stormwater Program here at the Division of Water Quality within the water boards. And my primary role when I first got hired was helping to draft the new permit. And now I'm moving on to implementation. So I'm working on some of the guidance there and then trying to enact some of the new provisions like the additional prerequisite review for the QSDs and QSPs.
All
Thank
right.
you. And hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Shimizu. I'm an environmental scientist alongside Brandon. We are in the Industrial and Construction Stormwater Unit. My primary job responsibilities is the lead for all construction and industrial related materials with SMARTS. So myself, I was in charge of all of the new features for the 2022 CGP, and a big shout out to Patrick Osuji for his help on that. He put in a lot of work and effort in that as well. So just big shout out to him. But yeah, glad to be here today. I'm here with Brandon, who's going to help me with some of the more technical questions we have. So nice to meet everyone.
And Matthew, a lot of people may recognize you replaced I'm sorry, John.
Patrick.
Patrick, thank you. You replaced Patrick, didn't you?
Yeah,
in that role, I should say.
Yeah, so I took over kind of midway through the updates to SMARTS for the 2022 CGP. And then Patrick has now become our supervisor in the Industrial and Construction Stormwater Unit.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, good. It's nice having you and seeing your names on all those emails. All right, so this first part, you're just going to, I guess, go down and talk about some of the changes that you've done in SMARTS, and sounds like you've been spending a lot of time doing that. And so, if you just highlight some of those changes for us.
Yeah. So just a real brief overview. So in this presentation, I plan on discussing some of the following. So the first are some of the more major updates that we've made to the SMARTS interface. And then, as John said, we broke it up into 4 separate parts. So in part 1, I plan to discuss how to create a new construction application, how to link users, the total maximum daily load TMDL process, the post-construction process, and some more clarification on some of the required documentation, and then the notice of termination process. And then in part 2, I'm going to go into the reporting processes for both the ad hoc monitoring reports and the annual reports. In part 3, I will discuss some of the amending of SWIPs and other parts of the NOI in that process. And then lastly, in part 4, we are going to have a Q&A discussion for any questions you guys might have. So moving forward, some of the bigger SMARTS updates. One, staff updated the SMARTS main menu interface to help streamline and simplify some of the navigation for users throughout the system. So as you can see on the screen, this is the new SMARTS main menu and interface. Staff also included a new function to allow users to link or delink other users when creating a new application. So now there's 2 areas where users can add additional users or delink others. We included a initial application questions section when creating a new application or construction application, which will allow users to kind of determine which application type their site is eligible for. And then finally, staff updated the entire interface and format for all items related to the 2022 CGP. Okay, so moving forward to part 1, 2022 CGP and SMARTS. So creating a new application. So this is a little bit new of a process. So in order to create a new construction application, the following must be complete. Must select the construction permit from the Start a New Application drop-down list. Then the user may either create a new organization or link that application to an existing organization. From there, the user may then add or delink users to that application. Once those steps are completed, the user is then placed into the initial application question section to verify which application their site qualifies for. And then finally, they're going to confirm and create the application. And I'm going to go into more in depth on these steps in the next few slides. So from the main menu, the user would want to go to the Start a New Application drop-down list, select construction permits, and then select statewide construction. The construction application types consist of the notice of intent, the small construction erosivity waiver, and the notice of non-applicability, which is new. So an NOI is required for dischargers with construction or land disturbance activities that result in disturbance of 1 or more acres or less than 1 acre, but part of a larger common plan of development or sale that in total has 1 or more acres of disturbance. Then you have the waiver. So dischargers eligible for the waiver are exempt from CGP permit coverage if the site is between 1 and 5 acres. Sites are not eligible for a waiver if larger than 5 acres or if part of a larger common plan of development or sale that is larger than 5 acres. And the construction activity must take place during a period when the calculated rainfall erosivity factor, or the R factor, is less than 5. And then finally, a NONA is for dischargers claiming an exemption from CGP coverage due to no discharge. And so dischargers are eligible for a NONA if their site's physical location is not hydrologically connected to waters of the United States. A NONA requires a no discharge technical report to be signed by a California licensed professional engineer or geologist with hydrological expertise and then uploaded into SMARTS. Moving forward to the organization selection, the user may either create a new organization or link the application to an existing organization that the user is currently linked to. However, please note that only LRPs are eligible to create new organizations. So as you can see at the top of the screen, that create new organization button is only going to be available to users who are LRPs. Moving forward, the user may then either add or delink users to the application. This was a new feature that we added. And then once done, the user will select the confirm and create application button to continue. And then finally, the user is placed into the initial applications query. And so this is a new feature program to assist users in selecting the correct application type to apply for, help determine application eligibility, and to generate the correct application interface, such as the traditional or linear interface. And so when hovering over the 3 available application types, it will provide the user with a description of the application type and some general requirements. And so users may switch between different application types as many times as they want to confirm which application their site can apply for. However, once they hit that create application button, the application will be created and the user cannot change to another application type and instead must delete and restart. So some examples of that is if you had created an NOI but needed a waiver, you would need to delete the NOI and then start this process over. And then if you were to create a linear NOI but needed a traditional NOI, same thing, you would need to delete and then restart the process. And then finally,
Matthew, can I interject there? Also,
yes.
I don't know, we were talking about this the other day, but I don't know if it was an intended function, but one of the ones I love about this new screen is that many times LRPs will have multiple LRP accounts. And in the old days, we'd have to do trial and error. And the problem was in the old way, it would actually create an application ID. But here we can look at who they are, the contact persons, and if this is indeed the right SMARTS account. And we don't create an application ID until we hit that blue button at the bottom, create application. And I think that has kept things so much cleaner.
Definitely. Yeah, thank you for that comment. Appreciate that. And then lastly, some of the answers that are entered in this initial application question section, they'll also automatically populate later on within the application itself. So linking users, so some linking privileges per user role. So LRPs may link all user roles, and up to 3 LRPs are allowed per organization. And then there's no limit to how many DARs or DEPs are linked. As for the DAR, the duly authorized representative, they may only link other DEPs or data entry persons. And then finally, data entry persons cannot link any other users. And so real quick, the linking process consists of the following. So the first, the user would go to the account management section, and then they would go to the manage linked users section. From there, they would either use the search function to find and link a new user, or they would click on the user's existing account ID to modify their access. From there, they would then select an organization to link the user to, and then they would link the user to a specific application or WDID tied to the organization. Now, this can be one, or this could be multiple, or this can be everything. And then finally, the user would then select either yes or no to confirm if the user is automatically linked to all future applications created for the organization or not moving forward. Now moving to the TMDL tab. So a total maximum daily load, or TMDL, is a calculation of the maximum amount of a pollutant from potential sources in the watershed that a water body may receive while attaining water quality standards. A TMDL is defined as the sum of the allowable loads of a single pollutant from all contributing point sources and non-point sources, plus the contribution from background sources. And so regional water boards and sometimes the US EPA adopt TMDLs into regional water quality control plans for implementation through regulatory mechanisms such as orders and permits. A full list of TMDLs adopted in the 2022 CGP and associated implementation requirements may be found in attachment H of the permit. And so the TMDL implementation requirements may affect a construction site's monitoring requirements if sources of the specific pollutant are present on site and have the potential to discharge to impaired watersheds or water bodies. So several TMDL implemented through the 2022 CGP have associated TMDL numeric action levels and numeric effluent limitations that dischargers are required to compare discharge sample results to if non-visible pollutant monitoring is triggered. And so exceedances of TMDL numeric action levels require the discharger to implement BMPs to prevent further exceedances, while exceedances of the TMDL numeric effluent limitations are violations of the permit and require the discharger to conduct water quality-based corrective actions. And so real briefly, I'm going to go through the TMDL process itself, since this is a whole new item in SMARTS specifically for the CGP. So step number one would be to use the external TMDL mapping tool at the very top of the screen. Enter in your site's coordinates or address, and then see if any TMDL water bodies or watersheds are listed in the tool. The mapping tool uses GIS to provide a list of applicable TMDL water bodies or watersheds that the site has potential to discharge to. So if the mapping tool lists any TMDL water bodies or watersheds, go ahead and mark yes at the very top in the bubble, and then continue with the TMDL process. However, if the mapping tool does not list any TMDL water bodies or watersheds, you would want to mark no, and then you are finished with this tab and can continue on with the rest of the application. From there, it is then up to the discharger to select all applicable TMDL water bodies or watersheds that apply to the site. So as you can see in the screen in that dropdown, those are going to be a list of all of the applicable TMDL water bodies or watersheds that apply to the project based on the region. And then once the TMDL water bodies or watersheds are selected, their TMDL information will be listed in the middle table right here. So all of their TMDL information will be listed there. Dischargers must then select either yes or no for if the TMDL pollutant is present in construction site stormwater discharge. If yes, the discharger is responsible for complying with that TMDL's pollutants requirements. And then if no, the discharger is not responsible for complying with that TMDL pollutants requirements. And then finally, the applicable TMDLs will later be listed in the TMDL requirements table and on the requirements tab. So all applicable TMDL requirements will be listed here and on the requirements tab that I'll discuss later on. And as a side note, data on the TMDL tab may be updated at any time once the WDID is issued, and no COI is required to update TMDL data. So as mentioned in the last slide, all TMDL related requirements that are applicable to the site are going to be displayed on this table in the requirements tab once the WDID is issued. These are the TMDL parameters that the discharger must comply with. So moving forward to the post-construction. So the 2022 CGP includes post-construction requirements to mitigate the impacts of excess runoff due to an increase of impervious surfaces built during construction, such as paved areas or rooftops. Many construction sites are located in a phase 1 or phase 2 MS4 jurisdiction and must comply with the local post-construction requirements of that jurisdiction to slow the flow of the excess runoff. Sites that are located outside of a phase 1 or phase 2 MS4 jurisdiction must utilize the post-construction water balance calculator in SMARTS to show what measures are being implemented to offset the excess runoff. So when beginning the post-construction process, users must answer the following questions. So the first question is going to ask, is the project located within a permitted phase 1 or phase 2 municipal separate storm sewer system MS4 area? If they select yes, the post-construction process is complete and users must upload their NPDES phase 1 or phase 2 MS4 post-construction requirement documentation. And then this selection will require 2 post-construction documents to be uploaded to the NOI. However, if they select no, another question will populate and ask, will the project be subdivided into smaller sub-areas or drainage management areas? If yes, the user may add multiple sub-areas with their own post-construction calculations, and then the user will then move to the input section to begin entering post-construction calculations for each sub-area created. If no, the user may only add a single area with post-construction calculations, and the user will then move to the input section to begin entering post-construction calculations for that single area. So moving forward to the input and output section. So the input section is where users may enter their pre-project conditions to determine the existing runoff volume. Upon selecting the compute and save button, SMARTS will run the calculation and display the results in the output section. The inputs post-construction data is calculated in the output section. So if the total post-project runoff volume is less than or equal to the pre-project runoff volume, then a green message will display and the user is done with their post-construction calculations. The user may then save and continue with the rest of the application. However, if the total post-project runoff volume is greater than the pre-project runoff volume, then a red message will display and the user will need to move forward to the post-construction credits to try to lower their post-project runoff volume. The credits tab will then generate for the user to access. So as you can see at the bottom, this specific site did not pass and they need to move forward with the credits. Moving forward to the credit section. The credit section is where users enter data for specific credits that apply to their site, but not all credits may be used. These credits help lower the site's post-project runoff volume, so it may be less than or equal to the pre-project runoff volume. A user cannot continue until the site's post-project runoff volume is less than or equal to the pre-project runoff volume. And as a side note, data on the post-construction tab may be updated at any time once the WDID is issued, because, for example, site conditions may change that alter which credits may be used. It is going to be required to update the post-construction data once the WDID is issued. Moving forward to some of the required attachments for the post-construction. So for traditional NOIs, the following post-construction attachments may be required. As previously mentioned in the post-construction initial question slide, both attachments are only required if the site resides within a permitted phase 1 or phase 2 MS4 area. If not, then only the post-construction attachment is required. And so for the post-construction attachment, staff are looking for some of the post-construction plans, calculations, and other supporting documentation in compliance with either the CGP post-construction requirements or the applicable phase 1 or phase 2 post-construction requirements. And then for the MS4 post-construction requirements attachment, this is an attachment containing the applicable NPDES phase 1 or phase 2 MS4 permittees post-construction requirements or a web source, to those requirements. And so the water boards are requiring these documents to verify compliance with the applicable MS4 and CGP post-construction requirements. Preliminary post-construction documentation is acceptable with the initial PRDs, but users must later upload the final approved post-construction documentation within 14 days of MS4 approval and prior to terminating coverage. So moving forward to the notice of termination. So what is an NOT? A notice of termination, or NOT, is a submittal for dischargers to request termination of permit coverage for active WDIDs. NOTs are required to verify that appropriate stormwater controls and measures are met upon completion of construction, period of inactivity, change in ownership, and so forth. The NOT must be submitted by dischargers and approved by the applicable regional water board to terminate coverage. If the NOT is not submitted and approved, permit coverage remains active and the site will continue to be invoiced annually, despite construction either being completed, never have occurred, or being sold to a new owner. Dischargers must comply with all applicable permit requirements until the NOT is approved. The user must select one of the termination options, enter data for all required fields with a red asterisk, and upload all required documents. Please note that all required annual reports must be submitted prior to the NOT submission, and there will be a completion check that displays for any outstanding annual reports that have not been submitted. Once these actions are complete, an LRP or DAR with their signed electronic authorization form on file may then certify and submit the NOT. And then finally, the 2022 CGP included a new provision where NOTs are now automatically approved after 30 days if regional water board staff have not acted upon the NOT to either approve, return, deny, So this screen displays the various NOT termination options a user may select. Depending on the termination option selected, different fields are going to generate. So some of the termination options consist of the following. So the first one being all construction activities are completed and the final stabilization requirements are met. So this means that construction activities are completed and final stabilization requirements such as construction materials and waste being removed, all temporary BMPs being removed, bare areas stabilized, post-construction plans uploaded, etc. have been met. The second termination option would be all construction activities are suspended and the final stabilization requirements are met. So this means that the construction activities will be temporarily suspended and final stabilization requirements such as construction materials and waste being removed, bare areas being stabilized, erosion and sediment controls being in place, and so forth have been met. This option is generally used for suspension greater than 1 year where dischargers do not want to pay the annual and ongoing invoices, and users must file for a new NOI once construction recommences. Another option, which is a new option, is site does not discharge stormwater to waters of the United States. So this is a new termination option where the site does not discharge stormwater to waters of the United States. If they select this option, they must upload a no discharge technical report when submitting this NOT. Another option would be discharge of stormwater from the site is now subject to another NPDES permit. This just means that the site is now covered under another NPDES permit and no longer requires CGP coverage. Another option is site is under new ownership. This means that the construction site is under new ownership. Please keep in mind that permit coverage is not transferable to different entities. And as a result, whenever there is a change in ownership, the previous owners must file an NOT and inform the new owners of their responsibility to obtain permit coverage if the site does not meet the final stabilization requirements or if there is ongoing construction. And then lastly, there's the other option, which allows users to enter an explanation regarding a different termination option other than the ones provided. And then last slide for part one, for the NOT attachments tab. First off, users are able to upload multiple attachments at once, as you can see on the screen. And then depending on the construction type, either traditional or linear, and the termination option selected, users may need to upload different attachment types. Some of the required attachments include the final site map, photographs of the site, the QSP final inspection report, the long-term maintenance plan, which is only required for traditional sites, and then post-construction documentation, which is only required for traditional sites that did not already upload their finalized post-construction plan in the NOI. And so these documents help regional water board staff streamline their reviews of the construction NOTs. And so that kind of wraps up part one. I don't know if we want to do questions or continue.
There were a few that were related to what we just talked about. So the questions asked about no discharge technical reports. And are there any resources, guidance as far as what needs to go in there beyond what we see in the permit? Has the water board come up with any maybe templates or anything? Or
we don't have any templates available for the no discharge technical report, but essentially what we're looking for is kind of just evidence that there is no discharge to waters of the United States. We did recently receive one report which basically cited a jurisdictional determination from the Army Corps of Engineers, and we consider that sufficient evidence. So, so that's kind of what we're looking for at this moment. But we can, as we get more examples of the notice of non-applicability and no discharge technical reports, we'll probably develop some guidance.
Okay. Let's see. Some of these questions are permit compliance. I want to save them to the end. TMDLs. So the TMDLs, is that a soil assessment required for site TMDLs or only for construction materials used? Is the question being asked there?
And I respond to that one in the chat. A pollutant
right.
source assessment requires that the discharger consider all pollutant sources. of TMDL related pollutants, and that may include the soil. And so a soil assessment should be done in that case. And I did want to point out that there are two TMDLs in attachment H. I believe they're in region 4 that do require soil screening investigations because they have some pretty strict NELs associated with them.
Okay. Okay. And then I believe you said this, Matthew, but a data entry person, they can create an application, they just can't certify it. Is that correct?
Correct. They can create a new application so long as they're already linked to the organization itself. And then they can fill out all of the required information and data. They just cannot certify and submit.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Let's save the rest for the Q&A time because we have a lot to cover still.
Yeah.
And this next section, reporting, there were some surprises, and I know a lot of people are watching that are interested in this. We did our very first 2022 CGP annual report here recently. You know, September 1st was not that long ago, and we were surprised by a new feature. So it covered maybe what is new in the section on reporting and ad hocs based on the new permit.
Yeah, certainly. So part 2, we're going to go ahead and discuss some of the reporting. So this is the file report section. So users may access both the ad hoc monitoring reports and the annual reports from this file report section. And additionally, new reports may be created from this section as well. So going to discuss the ad hoc monitoring process first. So what is an ad hoc monitoring report? An ad hoc monitoring report is an electronic form that documents a construction site's analytical data for stormwater sampling conducted throughout the reporting period. And so an ad hoc monitoring report is required when stormwater discharge has occurred on site. And the following examples convey when an ad hoc monitoring report is going to be required. So for example, if a risk level 2 or 3 discharger, they must sample their stormwater discharge after a qualified precipitation event has stormwater discharge. Another example would be risk level 1, 2, or 3 dischargers with non-visible pollutants listed in their pollutant source assessment. So sampling for non-visible pollutants are only going to be required if the pollutants may be discharged due to a failure to implement BMPs, a container spill or leak, or a BMP breach failure or malfunction. However, if the material containing the pollutant is removed or BMPs to control the pollutant are implemented prior to discharge, then non-visible sampling is not going to be required. And then the last example is dischargers implementing dewatering for pH and turbidity. And then just as a side note, if there is no stormwater discharge or the discharge is contained, then stormwater sampling is not required for any of the examples I provided. So ad hoc monitoring reports are manually created by dischargers, and there is no limit to how many reports may be created. However, a new ad hoc monitoring report cannot be created for a submitted annual report. And additionally, a previously submitted ad hoc monitoring report cannot be deleted from SMARTS, as only unsubmitted reports that were never previously submitted may be deleted by an LRP or DAR. So moving forward to the event information within the ad hoc. So in the event information tab, users must enter event information for the ad hoc monitoring report. And so once the event information is saved, the ad hoc monitoring report is going to be created and saved to the record. So the drainage areas tab is new for the 2022 construction ad hoc report. Staff added this tab for enforcement on parameter exceedances, as they are going to be based on exceedances within a drainage area. Users must enter information associated with the drainage areas where sampling occurred and may create as many drainage areas as necessary. So in the monitoring locations tab, monitoring locations are going to be tied to the previously created drainage areas. All finalized drainage areas will populate in the drainage area drop-down list for the user to select. Users must enter information for the monitoring location where sampling occurred and may create as many monitoring locations as necessary. So in the raw data tab, users must enter sampling data for their site's parameters. So pH and turbidity are automatically going to be generated in each ad hoc report, as well as any applicable TMDL parameters. Users may also they can also add and delete parameters as necessary by selecting that add additional parameter button. So as far as required attachments, there are no required attachments when submitting an ad hoc monitoring report. However, users must upload the laboratory results documentation if the laboratory analyzed any of the samples that they had entered. And as previously mentioned, users may upload multiple attachments at once. Okay. So moving forward to the annual report process. So what is an annual report? The annual report is an electronic form that documents a construction site's inspections and monitoring performed throughout the reporting year in compliance with the CGP. So the annual report is helpful in summarizing compliance activities for construction sites throughout California. The annual report is automatically generated for all active WDIDs, as the report requirement is based on the status of the WDID, not on construction activities. So only WDIDs that are active for 3 months or more within the reporting period are required to submit their annual report. And then the reporting period ranges from July 1st to June 30th of each year. So for example, if a WDID was issued on May 15th, 2023, then the 23-24 annual report would not be required. However, if a WDID was issued on January 4th, 2023, then the 23-24 annual report would be required and must be submitted prior to September 1st, 2024. The annual report must be submitted by September 1st of each year that the WDID remains active. Outstanding annual reports are subject to enforcement action by the regional water boards and potential monetary fines. Monetary fines will apply if a discharger receives 2 notices of non-compliance and 60 days have passed since the first notice of non-compliance was issued. So for the 2022 CGP, we changed the format of the annual report and included a new document entitled the Compliance Summary. So compared to the 09 CGP's annual report, we considerably condensed the number of questions and fields in the 2022 CGP's annual report. And we were able to do so by incorporating the Compliance Summary document. And so this document, or a document of similar structure, meeting the requirements of Order Section IVP3, shall be utilized by dischargers throughout each reporting period to document their data. Any field answered yes in the inspections, sampling, violations, and in corrective actions tab must have data entered in their respective section on the compliance summary document. But if the field is answered no, then data in that section of the compliance summary document does not need to be completed. And then this document helps regional water board staff review the reporting data entered for each reporting period. And then finally, all ad hoc monitoring reports must be submitted prior to the annual report submission. LRPs or DARs are stopped on the annual report's completion check if there are any unsubmitted ad hoc reports within the same reporting period. So moving forward to the general information tab. So on the general information tab, users must first answer the was construction active for 3 months or longer within this reporting period question. If they answer yes, the users must complete the remaining fields and tabs in the annual report. But if they answer no, then they just need to enter an explanation and may submit the annual report afterwards. And so no further action would be required if they are selecting that no option and they enter their explanation.
Could we clarify just on that point? I know there's a lot of confusion many times on that question. Yeah, that slide right there. So when the water board says, was a construction active for 3 months or longer, how do you define active? Is that in the glossary? What is that definition? Because different people could define that differently. What's your thoughts there?
I would say as soon as there's any ground disturbance, but Brandon, if you have a different
I agree.
idea.
Yeah, I believe. So we have instances where a WDID may be active for several months, but they haven't actually done construction activities for up to 3 months. And so I would treat the active as active construction activities.
So what if, and again, this is a question we see a lot. What if the job shut down for some reasons, but after ground was disturbed, and they didn't do any construction for 3 months, but yet we still have lots of disturbed soil. Is that still considered active?
I would consider that active because there is still disturbed soil that has not been stabilized.
Okay. Okay. Is there a something in the glossary that addresses that, that defines active?
I would have to double check. I believe active construction is defined in the glossary.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll double check. But yeah, we get that question a lot, or as people are doing the annual report, they're saying we weren't active. Like, for example, you could have a period of inactivity, right? That you're going to talk about, I think, in the next segment. Um, if you had a period of inactivity during that whole time, would you still need an annual report? Um, I don't know if you can answer that at this point. I don't mean to put you, surprise you with that question, but it's
Mhm.
just occurred to me as we were discussing that.
I think I responded to one in the chat that was kind of along the lines of that. If a project is over an acre but has construction scheduled less than 3 months, does it need an annual report? And my answer to that would be technically all WDIDs need annual reports, but some of them, if their construction is less than 3 months, only have to answer this first question, no, provide an explanation, and then certify and submit it. So that counts as their annual report. They're not
Okay.
having to submit documentation of all their inspections, compliance actions, etc.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, moving forward to the inspection, sampling, violations, and corrective actions tab. So this is where users would go through each question and answer. So if they answer yes to any of the data, then they would need to enter data in the specific section within the compliance summary spreadsheet. But if they answer no, then data in that specific section of the spreadsheet does not need to be completed. And then users may obtain the compliance summary document at the top of this tab in red. However, please keep in mind that the compliance summary document provided is optional to use, and that users may track their information and upload their own documentation so long as it complies with the requirements found in order section IVP3. And some examples of this, so Caltrans, Casqua, WGR, Southwest, they've all created their own forms to use for in lieu of this spreadsheet. So the compliance summary spreadsheet is a new document that we incorporated into the 2022 CGP's annual report to assist discharges with tracking inspection and monitoring data throughout the reporting period. The document contains various tabs where data may be entered, and then these tabs are going to consist of the inspection log, the inspection exceptions, sampling exceptions, violations, corrective actions, and then the unimplemented corrective actions. And in these tabs, users may enter data associated with their sites, inspections, inspection and sampling exceptions, and then the violations and unimplemented and implemented corrective actions. And so this is the annual reports ad hoc reports tab. And so this is where users may create new ad hoc monitoring reports and access all of the existing ad hocs that are associated with this specific annual report. And as far as attachments, the following attachment file types must be uploaded to the annual report. So you must upload the compliance summary and the training log. And you only need to upload the training log if you're not entering text in the delegates field on the general information tab. And as previously mentioned, you can upload multiple attachments at once. And then finally, if the user did not upload the applicable documents in either the general information or the inspection, sampling, violations, and corrective actions tabs, then they may also upload those attachments directly in the attachments tab. And additionally, all of the documents that were uploaded in those two tabs, they will also display in the attachments tab in this table below. Okay, and that takes us to part 3, so the amending of SWIPs and NOI discussion. So
I'm muted. I'm sorry.
oh,
We were going to open this up and just kind of talk about it, but Brandon, I'm seeing a lot of questions about the annual report. And before we leave that, maybe we should address those because I know a lot of people are interested in that. You were also watching some of those questions. Is there any one of those you want to maybe jump in and start by addressing? I know there was a couple questions that talking about violations. And I've heard a lot of talk in the industry right now about is it the job of a QSP to really identify a violation or call something a violation? It could be just semantics. I mean, if we call it a potential violation, maybe that makes that all go away.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know and satisfies everyone. But you probably have been hearing the same type of discussion. What's your thoughts on that?
On whether or not the QSP should be identifying violations.
Yes.
Yes, I think they should be. And that kind of goes the same for the 2009 annual report. It's all self-reporting violations, which I know does leave some room for third-party lawsuits, and is kind of challenging and a little bit scary there. But when I think the framing that you just mentioned of having it be a potential violation is great, because there's a lot of things that could be violations of the permit, but we do oftentimes include time for implementing corrective actions to address those. And so I'm thinking if someone has a violation, but they're addressing it, typically from at least from my experience with the regional water board staff, they're a little bit more lenient there.
Right. And you have two tabs. You have the violations tab or maybe potential violations tab, and then you have corrective action tab. There's also, I think, some talk and confusion, I think, about what goes where or does it go both? So there are things that are clear, like the attachment D says you will cover your waste bins at the end of every day and during rain events. And it's pretty clear if you didn't do that or not, that you didn't comply with that requirement. But there are others, like let's say a concrete washout overflow. Now, that's something that's probably needing corrective action and should go on that. Can you give any guidance as far as what should go on the violations tab and what should go on the corrective action tab?
Um, that could be many things, I guess. It's a pretty broad answer for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm thinking of, where a specific requirement in the permit is not being met, I consider that a violation. Or if there's no iterative BMP process, so say you had a numeric action level exceedant and you didn't do anything in response to that, I consider that a violation. So violations can be inspection and monitoring based. They could also be BMP implementation based. And then corrective action, I would say, is something that you're doing to rectify that, trying to correct that issue. So I think one of them is more moving in the positive direction, and one of them is kind of showing like, oh, we did have this misstep. Let's try and fix that. So
Then perhaps the violation isn't the BMP failure, but the failure to take action in 72 hours or commence
yep,
action.
that could be a violation as well.
And that would probably be the violation, not the actual BMP failure.
Right.
Okay. We have a few that have commented. If you have a question for Brandon or Matthew concerning this, feel free to unmute and ask your question. All right. Otherwise, we'll move on to amending SWIFTs, but I know there's been a lot of questions about the reports, and because we're all trying to get our heads around it and figure out how do we do this in the field. Bob, I saw you had a few questions there. Did you get yours answered? Do you have any follow-up?
I'm working on Bob's.
Okay. All right. All right.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? This is Dusty. I work for Caltrans.
Hi,
And
Dusty.
I guess, hi. Some of my concerns with that self-reporting is we have been involved with ACLs where all of our corrective actions were used against us, even if they were addressed. So it's just a little concerning when you self-audit, there's a lot of apprehension for people because they don't want that to then be used against them. And it has happened in ACLs. When we identified something, it was fixed and it was still used against us. So I think that culture from the last to 09, we were told, no, that isn't how it's going to happen. But then it is been happening. So it's there's a lot of apprehension around those types of things that then they can be used against you.
Mm-hmm. And that's a fair point.
And perhaps we just change the terminology, still provide you some of, as we said, call it a potential. We don't even want to use the word violation, but potential, I don't know, inconsistency with the permit.
Mm-hmm. Or I know the regional water boards kind of have two levels of notifications. They have the notice of non-compliance, and then they have a notice of violation. So I typically consider the non-compliance almost as a warning. And the regional water boards tend to, or at least in my experience, try to work to correct those notices of non-compliance. And then sometimes, depending on the degree of severity for the notice of violation, that kind of evolves into an ACL.
Okay, I'm not sure how to pronounce his first name, but I think it's Drishti. Pointed out that on the tab for NOVs, there's a pull down, or I'm sorry, for violation types, there's a pull down menu that says a deficient BMP implementation. That can be a violation, no doubt. Like the example I just gave, if the permit says you will cover it at the end of every day and you don't, then there's not much corrective action for that particular day. You didn't cover it. That would be a violation or potential violation. But there are other BMP deficiencies that certainly could land in the corrective action camp, like fiber roll that has been ran over or silt fence that's blown down. That certainly should end up in the corrective action, not be a violation. Would you agree with that, Brandon and Matthew?
I think so.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Has the previous compliance enforcement mechanisms of the regional board and MS4 oversight not been effective and therefore a need determined for this current self non-compliance reporting? I think one of the things you said, Brandon, is that these requirements aren't new. That this is actually what was in the 09 permit. You're asking for a new format in the reporting of the data, but I heard you say that you're not asking for anything new.
Correct. We didn't really propose very many changes to the annual report requirements, if at all. And so a lot of these requirements are the same as 2009. We're just implementing them a little bit more stringently, I think. And that's kind of where one of the problems is. We thought we were making it easier by including the compliance summary as something that can be worked on throughout the year. That way, you're just entering as you go, and then you can simply upload, rather than kind of having to dig through it all to solve or to fill out the survey questions of the 2009 CGP annual report. But what we're hearing is it's a lot more granular and detailed viewing at least the template that we have provided for the annual report and the compliance summary compared to the 2009 report. And one of the things I'm discussing here with Bob in the chat is I don't necessarily think that the 2009 annual report was kind of truly implemented in the spirit of what the annual report requirements say. They're written kind of in a way that sounds like we're asking for details. And so one of the ways to solve this would be kind of tweaking that language, making it more summary oriented in a future reissuance.
Okay. We'll take one more. I see iPad Pro 3. I have no idea who that is, but you have your hand up. Go ahead and unmute. And if you have a question about annual reports, we'd like to hear from you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Larry Fabro. One of the things that I have a challenge with is the summary report. I mean, most of us go out and we do our inspections and corrections and check some boxes, some pictures, but then summarizing all that data into your, from all these individual reports throughout the year and summarizing all that data to pull it into a summary report just seems a heck of a lot of work. And I'm trying to figure out how to streamline that, automate that, and any recommendations from anybody out there how to do that? I mean, it's just kind of a repetitive of what I've already done, but now I've got to suck all that data into a format that's supplied.
Well, Matthew had mentioned that WGR is putting together an alternate spreadsheet, as I've seen others. Mm-hmm. I think Cloud Comply is going to be giving a presentation later this week, and I've heard of a few others who are taking their inspection reports. And basically, the technology behind most of these inspection reports, these electronic ones, is a database. And so since it's a database, we can put it into a spreadsheet format. And so I'm sure that whichever, if you're using electronic inspection service, I am sure there's a database behind that, and they should be able to output the same fields that the water board's requiring. Basically, what we did was we just sat down with our forms, identified our fields, and then took the water board's spreadsheet and just did a cross check. And we found we had some gaps, and so we added those questions to our forms. So hopefully now, when at the end of the year, we can just spit out a spreadsheet that's based on the same inspection form that everybody's been filling out all year. So I think that's the way the industry is going to do it. I think that was your question.
Yeah, that was exactly my questions, and I'm glad to see that others have had that same challenge. If you could share some of that maybe with us or with myself or with the teams out here.
Yeah, I would say if you're using an electronic app, talk to the people who service you're using. I am sure that most of them are working on this right now.
Cool, thank you.
All right. Well, we really kind of ran out of time, but this has been good. It's been our intent to talk about the changes in SMARTS. Brandon and Matthew, you guys have always been very accessible, not just to WGR, but to anybody who wants to talk about these subjects. If they want to dialogue about this more via email or even a phone call, how would they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I have. Let me just pull up. I mean, the COI was real quick. I was just going to discuss the inactive project, but
well, we got a couple minutes. If you want to do that, go for it.
Sure. Here's our contact. I have a QR code for all of the construction-related help guides. If you guys do, I'll put that in at the end again. But real quick for the COI, COIs are required to update information on active WDIDs. And it must be approved by the regional board in order to see that information be reflected. A table of COIs will be listed below. You cannot delete previously submitted COIs, and you cannot start a new COI until either the initial COI was either approved or denied. And so for inactive projects, this was a new provision that we added to qualify to inactivate a project. All the construction activities must be suspended for 30 days or more. And you would do so by going to the inactive project tab within a COI. From there, you must answer yes to the first and to the third question. And then finally, you would need to upload a revised SWIP containing a revised site-map and then photographs demonstrating temporary stabilization BMPs were implemented. And then once the regional water boards approve, that would be when inspection and monitoring is suspended and reduced. However, we do still expect QSPs or trained delegates to visually inspect the site at least once every calendar month and for pre-precipitation events, unless there's a documented exception. And then switching between inactive status does not delay or suspend annual invoicing, as the WDID will continue to be invoiced annually. And then to reactivate a project, you would essentially go through the same process again, where you would answer questions 2, and then this is question 4. It populates once you answer yes. And then you would upload it via sitemap containing photographs of the site's current conditions. And then once approved by the regional water boards, the site becomes active again, and then all inspection and monitoring requirements then apply. And so that's just the real brief inactive project provision. So,
and perfect timing because we're out of time. So I want to thank both you gentlemen, Matthew and Brandon, for being a part of this. And you know, there's a lot of people that are trying to get their heads around it, and I really appreciate you being open and willing to talk about this. And there's the contact information on the screen. If you go right there, maybe take a quick screenshot of that. This is recorded, so you can always come back. So thank you to all you who attended. And we got one more workshop happening this next hour and a bunch more the rest of the week. So we look forward to seeing you in the next Stormwater Awareness Week workshop. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.